The Warcraft logs for Season of Discovery are changing up drastically today, so let's jump right into it. First, we're focusing on the current 1 leaders by day in WoW Classic Season of Discovery. The top spot is currently held by Cuties, an Arcane Mage player from the guild on the Living Flame EU server. But the competition is fierce, with several other top players vying for the coveted spot. Shaman tank player Nightsong, Warlock tank player Nigimzax, and Hunter melee player Treeranger have each also held the top spot 13 times, showing their consistent performance and dedication to the game. In the balanced Druid category, Sintit from Wild Growth EU in the guild Blessed X has taken the lead with a DPS of 1069.3. Innate from Crusader Strike US in the guild Humbertism, who has held the top spot for over a week, is now in second place with a DPS of 1051.2. Hotmiss from Living Flame EU in the guild 99 maintains the third position with a DPS of 1029.8. The remaining top 10 are Blazaris, Centripetal, Adriu, OK Bloomer, Shah, Rooftralinks, and Loria. In the Feral Druid category, Parspalis from Living Flame EU in the guild Silver Saga maintains the top spot for the 5th consecutive day with a DPS of 1466.8. This player shows remarkable consistency, demonstrating their mastery of the class. Close behind in second place is BGDD from Living Flame EU in the guild B-Tribe, boasting a DPS of 1453.6. Rounding out the top 3 is Lawsuit, also from Living Flame EU in the guild Silver Saga with a DPS of 1436.2. The remaining top 10 for today are Giny, Africantiger, Cyril, Swagdonald, KDPs, Lil Claws, and Kates. In the Guardian Druid category, NMX from Lone Wolf US in the guild Chinese Textile Machine continues to hold the top spot with a DPS of 848.2, a position he's maintained for over a week now. Following closely, we have Kiljaripuli from Living Flame EU in the guild Sepan Kalasura with a DPS of 831.1, and Cadet from Living Flame EU in the guild B-Tribe with a DPS of 823.2. These players have shown remarkable consistency in their performance. The remaining top 10 for today are Sudoaptit, Ankler, Minutses, Saiju, Yuanfeng, Pumpex, and Giny. In the Melee Hunter category, Treeranger from Living Flame US in the Guild Cartel continues to dominate with a DPS of 1556.9, maintaining this top spot for over a week now. Not far behind, Olgi from Living Flame EU in the guild Den Dansky Meadow holds the second position with a DPS of 1514.9. Rounding out the top 3 is Johnnysons from Lone Wolf EU in the guild Oxygen with a DPS of 1507.9. The remaining top 10 for today are Resorth, Yanglachichi, Zatara, Cornshot, Minyaros, Wafflefreeze, and Tenaki. In the Ranged Hunter category, I sold out from Crusader Strike US in the guild Footlong Party Dog Saad has taken the lead with a DPS of 1432.2. Tubalumpkin from Living Flame US in the guild Smooth maintains a steady performance at second place with a DPS of 1349.7, holding this position for the past 2 days. Fragmaster from Living Flame EU in the guild B-Tribe is not far behind at third place with a DPS of 1338.6. The remaining top 10 for today are Bumrush, Mihureth, QIACID, Floraberries, Decio, Loki, and Potato Pilot. In the Arcane Mage category, Musakas from Lone Wolf EU in the guild, and Not Sure has taken the top spot with a DPS of 726.1, pushing Digidoo from Wild Growth EU in the guild Resist, who held the top position for 2 consecutive days, to second place with a DPS of 677.4. Cuties from Living Flame EU maintains the third spot with a DPS of 631.4. The remaining top 10 for today are Muju Gulang TW at 4, Insimage Lone Wolf EU at 5, Imwaxo Crusader Strike Us at 6, DZPNed Lone Wolf Us at 7, Greats Living Flame EU at 8, Kusin Living Flame EU at 9, and Mylene Lone Wolf EU at 10. In the Fire Mage category, Delano from Crusader Strike US in the guild Parse has held the top spot for 3 consecutive days with a DPS of 1195.3, demonstrating exceptional skill and consistency. Close behind is Qiazhu from Yixing Quan UTW in the guild Yuan QI, maintaining the second position with a DPS of 1177.8. Mellowish from Wild Growth US rounds out the top 3 with a DPS of 1158.8. The remaining top 10 for today are Tuma Charmer, Dukina Magisula, PDM, Sest Maltazar, and G. Li Z, each showcasing their prowess in this competitive field. In the Frost Mage category, the top player holding their position for over a week is Watchtome from Lone Wolf EU with an impressive DPS of 1039.4. Following closely in second place is Obi from Living Flame EU in the Guild Link logs, showcasing a DPS of 991.9. The third spot sees a new face, Clankum from Living Flame US, entering the top 3 with a DPS of 987.5. A notable shift from yesterday's third place holder, TDMZ from Crusader Strike US, who now sits at the 4th position. The remaining top 10 for today are Tripo from Lone Wolf EU, Shengming Yunizhen Mei from Shengming Laiyan TW, Jaboshi from Crusader Strike EU, Kiwi from Living Flame EU, Satika from Lone Wolf EU, and Diz from Wild Growth US. In the Protection Paladin category, the top 3 players remain consistent with Hei'er Mei IC from Shengming Laiyan TW in the Guild Xuancheng, holding the number 1 spot for over a week with a DPS of 1237.7. One Punch from Living Flame US in the Guild Cartel is a close second with a DPS of 1229.3, followed by Fakyaz from Lone Wolf US in the Guild Lethal with a DPS of 1221.3. These players continue to demonstrate exceptional skill and strategy in their gameplay. The remaining top 10 for today are Farvold from Living Flame EU, Boisothik from Lone Wolf US, Fought from Shengming Laiyan TW, and Ming from Gulang TW, Duz from Crusader Strike Us, Gon from Crusader Strike Us, and Munyu Fu Guang from Gulang TW. In the Retribution Paladin category, Peteri from Wild Growth EU in the Guild Dragonslayers continues to hold the top spot with a DPS of 1372.8, a position he's maintained for over a week. Following closely is Tyrion Poldering from Gogon Nugde KR in the Guild Ilrinajib, boasting a DPS of 1336.7. Rounding out the top 3 is Akanos from Crusader Strike US in the Guild Discovery Monkeys, with a DPS of 1331.9. The remaining top 10 players are Elv Chapo, Ge Zhu, Mu Ling Zhu, Henxiao Dadaju Hua, Genix, Ibadet, and Gao Da. In the Shadow Priest category, Wagga from Living Flame EU in the Guild Link logs continues to dominate with a DPS of 948.9, maintaining the top spot for the past 6 days. Ajelop from Living Flame EU in the Guild Joraverse has risen to second place with a DPS of 942.6, pushing Flay from Shadowstrike AU.U.S in the Guild Male Models to third place with a DPS of 940.6. The remaining top 10 for today are Theradrin, Valinor, Casemax, Eauxi, Skusho, Bonk Marshal, and Shadow Priest. In the DPS Rogue category, Body Snatcher from Shadowstrike AU.U.S in the Guild Fatality holds the top spot for the 3rd consecutive day with a DPS of 1507.1. Following closely, Zhu Shui Dai from Shengming Laiyan TW in the Guild Chuancheng maintains the 2nd position with a DPS of 1498.6. The 3rd spot is claimed by Karina from Godogan Nugde KR in the Guild Rundakyo with a DPS of 1493.1. The remaining top 10 for today are Sylv, Tiriella, Shrai, Reminder, Naranjaya, Rotterdam, and Ionel. In the Tank Rogue category, Nerf Assassin from Gulang TW in the Guild Nerf Shadow Club continues to dominate with a DPS of 1096.4, holding the top spot for over a week. Nova from Living Flame EU has surged to 2nd place today with a DPS of 1062.4, while Sketcher from Crusader Strike US in the Guild We The Ops maintains a strong presence in 3rd place with a DPS of 1034.6. The remaining top 10 for today are Scion from Wild Growth US, Twisted Step from Wild Growth US, Dean Teep from Wild Growth EU, Hakwin from Wild Growth EU, Lit from Gogon Nugde KR, Bobrogue from Living Flame EU, and Jingjizing Jiazheng K from Gulang TW. In the Elemental Shaman category, Hexmother from Lone Wolf US in the Guild Hunks continues to dominate with a DPS of 1165.9, maintaining the top spot for over a week now. The 2nd spot is claimed by Bangog Dongsum Jameog from Godogan Nugde KR with a DPS of 1115.0, a significant leap from yesterday's 3rd place. Gag from Living Flame EU in the Guild Den Dansky Meadow rounds out the top 3 with a DPS of 1111.6. The remaining top 10 for today are Thili, Needmilk, Lahipirika, Lavablurst, Elementalman, Nature Shock, and Shamandani. In the Enhancement Shaman category, NA from Living Flame EU in the guild Dendansky Metode has taken the lead with a DPS of 1,596.9, a significant increase from their previous DPS of 1,492.6. Iopetisham from Lone Wolf US in the guild Strictly Business, who held the top position consistently for the past week, is now in second place with a DPS of 1,550.6. Bositer from Living Flame EU in the guild Summers has made it to the top 3 with a DPS of 1,516.9. The remaining top 10 are Zobe, Boinky, BDD, Cryptenhance, Chod Handsomed, Fakeban, and This Game Sass. In the Tank Shaman category, Night Song from Living Flame EU in the guild Summers continues to hold the top spot for the 7th consecutive day, boasting a DPS of 1,147.5. Close behind, Ewo from Living Flame EU in the guild Trash maintains the second position with a DPS of 1,123.4, showing consistent performance since yesterday. Vistalo from Wild Growth EU in the guild Conspiracy rounds out the top 3 with a DPS of 1,013.1. The remaining top 10 players for today are Shamsky, Walks, Koshaman, Gearshaman, Salfir, Repio, and Taz, each demonstrating impressive stats and gameplay in their respective placements. In the DPS Warlock category, Taco from Shadowstrike AU.U.S in the guild Angles has maintained the top spot for over a week now, consistently delivering a DPS of 1,203.6. Following closely is Wayne Warlock from Shengming Lai Yan TW in the guild Cheng Nuo, holding the second position with a DPS of 1,169.4. The third spot has seen a change with a Maeto from Lone Wolf US stepping up, boasting a DPS of 1,160.7. The remaining top 10 for today are Pantslock, Strawberry, Benzialock, Firmatic, Zhangguodong Mater, and Pantsies. In the Tank Warlock category, Enigmazexcax from Living Flame EU in the guild Pepident holds the top spot for the 6th consecutive day, maintaining a DPS of 1,045.0. Lobster from Living Flame US in the guild Mud Hut Elite follows closely in second place with a DPS of 1,040.2. A new contender, Dinosaur from Wild Growth US in the guild Golden Girls, has broken into the top 3 with a DPS of 1,005.1. The remaining top 10 players for today are Gigapromax, Barrow, TikToxic, Kyric Meta, Genre Namdo, Havoc, and HND. In the Fury Warrior category, Sopato from Lone Wolf EU in the guild Ego holds the top spot for the 3rd consecutive day with a DPS of 1,801.5. Second place goes to Mobpio from Godowin Nugdi KR in the guild Ilrinajib, maintaining a DPS of 1,658.9. Rounding out the top 3 is Gia Kiigege from Gulang TW with a DPS of 1,626.1. The remaining top 10 for today are ZSW Subtomiov, Shaya, Alondo, Bishka, Barbala, and Sarks. In the Protection Warrior category, Suffrix from Crusader Strike US in the guild Exhausted has taken the lead with a DPS of 1,453.2, followed closely by Bodil from Lone Wolf US in the guild Lethal with a DPS of 1,436.3. Notably, Butane from Godowon Nogde KR in the guild Ilrinijib has maintained their position in the top 3 for over a week, currently holding a DPS of 1,418.9. The remaining top 10 players are Threat from Crusader Strike US, Agony from Shengming Lai Yan TW, Kabir from Living Flame EU, Duo Luosi Zhu from Shengming Lai Yan TW, Inzaki from Living Flame EU, Mani from Lone Wolf EU, and Matrix from Living Flame US.